All right. Hello and welcome back, everybody. We're here again with the Game Dev Show. Today we've got Harrison, Story, Dave, and Greg. And we're going to be talking about a couple of interesting topics, from some design pattern stuff to crunching at work and maybe even some video editing stuff like we're just getting into a minute ago. So good morning and welcome. Thanks, everybody, for coming out here and being here with us and all that stuff. I feel like I'm losing my words here. Anybody want to say anything before we get started?
Yeah, so I can jump in. Got a couple of videos out this week for the Dev Days of Summer for the Unity thing, because it's the week that I'm on, unfortunately for everybody. So there's Make a Polished Game with the Unity Asset Store, and that takes your standard assets, your art assets, and basically I show you how to get them in and make them look pretty.
Nice. Okay, what were the assets that you picked for that?
Mainly the assets you see on screen are things from people like Nature Manufacturer and characters from people like Frodo Factor. So those are the sort of level I'm looking at, really the more realistic side of things that you'll be creating with. And then I show you how I change those assets to match each other and then move them into the actual game itself with lighting, occlusion, culling, and those sort of things. I'll give you some tips on, which characters I pick and why, and what I look for in characters when I take them. So things like root motion, non-root motion, creatures with 100 legs over creatures that are just bipeds.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I need to go through and watch that. I've been so busy crunching on stuff that I haven't had a chance to watch your video, but I assume it's going to be some pretty amazing stuff. Anybody that hasn't seen Dave's stuff before, like every time I've worked with him, you see like this really ugly project for a second, and then Dave will spend 30 minutes working on it, and all of a sudden it looks like a AAA project, and you're like, what the fuck did he do? He just went in there and totally changed stuff up and makes it look beautiful. He's definitely good at that. Dave, I'm curious, have you ever thought about just being a technical artist?
Yeah, so my first job when I joined the industry way back in 2001, I think I left doing radar stuff, was a tools programmer for Sony. So it was actually working in Maya, building tools for Maya to go out into the studio. So you're talking about all the design stuff, all the art stuff, and the pipelines around it. And I was very lucky that I got to sit with some absolutely incredible artists and designers. And they taught me how they did their work, because I needed to know that to build art tools, etc. So I was very lucky. I mean, we wrote some of the first lighting stuff, light baking work with the game engines that Sony was producing. That took forever to bake because there was no distributed baking or anything like that. It was
or fast GPUs.
Press a button and sit there for a day. And it was like, if you wanted to make this faster, we just threw more money at the machines. We had like 20, 30 grand machines just sitting there basically burning out this rendering. But we were doing it all ourselves. We basically coded the whole thing ourselves. And it was a team of just 3 people. We had the lighting artist, we had me, and we had the graphics programmer that was doing the rendering on the engine. And we just sat there and basically burnt this thing out in about a week. But yeah, so from those sort of things and the tidbits I learned there, I got better at doing art, better at doing lighting, and learned all the processes around that, on top of being a coder that I was born and bred to build. So yeah, that's where it came from.
Came out with the keyboard in your hand.
Oh yeah. It was very painful for my mother. I feel very sorry for her. Full-size keyboard as well, not the short one I use now. But who needs a number pad? Or burn me in the comments. So yeah,
that's me.
That's basically how I got to do some of this stuff, and I enjoy it. So I stick with that sort of work, kind of like Story and his audio, which I should be better at, but I'm not. I got to work with some amazing audio designers. The guy who done the audio for Alien Isolation, that game, used to work with me at Sony AAA back in Computer Entertainment in London, and I got to work with him. And I wish I'd spent more time with him. Because he was really good at what he did and fantastic audio, but my audio needs work.
Mine's always on mute. Game was crazy. Like the sound effects and the creepy music was on another level.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I do go into some of the audio here. I do go into the idea of having clean audio come down and basically taking that and using reverb zones or using scripts to change your reverb or change the ambience, move the level and all the rest of it. I go into that sort of thing. And then I go into the action style music where a couple of enemies come onto you. You put in one particular thread of the music going on, and then you basically pick it up and add more to the music. The drums come on, then the techno beats come on as more and more of them come into it. The techno beats are a placeholder, and more of these enemies come in, and as you fight them and kill them off, the beats start slowing down after a certain period of time. And you can have these things with other action items, like you enter a trigger volume and you basically say, right, go into an action beat, and it will take into an action beat for that period of time. Those sort of things that wind into the music and atmosphere of your game. I go into a little bit of that. I touch on it. Basically, I touch on everything and say, tell me what you want me to make more of. And most people have gone, yeah, mixed lighting, please, because it's really confusing.
It's all the visual stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, most people, the funny thing is there is a couple of really good videos, and don't ask me to look them up, but that Unity did a while back on their mixed lighting and how to get really good mixed lighting in your games with light probes and all the rest. But they really didn't promote them very much. And now everybody goes, oh, I want to learn how to do mixed lighting. And they go onto the forums and they're getting bits and pieces and it doesn't quite fit together. But there's one video, and I will find it at some point and share it with everybody, but how to actually build your lighting out in a really good process, including reflection probes and all the rest. And how to get that baked aesthetic, but have really nice real-time shadows for your characters. So yeah, there's that. And I go into a little bit of that, but most people have asked for more of that. So when I start off the devlog series, because this also introduces my new game, which I'll also give you a link for in a minute, that I'm trying to promote, and that's going to have mixed lighting. So that's where it goes into. And also the video came out with the scene view bitmaps tool, because everybody, as soon as I put this out, they were like, why isn't your assets on sale? And I was like, well, I don't like to self-promote because I'm a terrible marketing person. So yeah, I spoke to Unity and they then put my asset on sale, and I basically then put that up, and I've sent you a link to that.
Nice. That's this one right here for anybody that wants to go check it out, the scene view bookmarks. Greg, it's been a little while since I heard from you. What's new in your world?
Well, been really busy at work. At work, they've got us doing this payroll training for certified testing at work. So I've been cramming for that. The quizzes have been kicking my butt. So it's like drinking from a fire hose. There's so much material. But I did watch your video, Dave. And one thing I noticed, when you baked in the lighting from the window, what's coming through the windows, it didn't seem like the shadows were really standing out against that light from the window. So I guess, how would you balance baking in light like that, but still getting realistic shadows from the guy that's walking around in the scene?
Yeah, so you want to, the one thing you want to do is not have shadow on shadow too much, because it then looks really weird. If you have a hugely dark shadow on an already dark shadow because you're adding lights on and then it's not blending, it starts looking really bad. So it's really cheating a lot of times. So the light that's actually coming from the windows is actually an unlit panel that basically has the bloom and brings on the bloom, and then there's a light that actually bakes in the actual shadows themselves. Then I add a couple of mixed lights in there that will give the real-time shadows for the character, because also I don't want to put mixed lights everywhere because you're going to start getting real performance hits. So in one of those scenes, which I knocked up in about a day, so don't judge me too harshly, there is only about 2 real-time lights in there, and the rest is area lights, unlit bloom, and all the rest of it to give it that nice feel that comes across. But you've got to be careful, as I say, if you have too many points where the character, and if their shadow just doesn't blend at all with the rest of the shadows, it looks odd and it gives a sort of an uncanny valley vibe. So yeah, there's a little bit of play there that you want to get around. And you'll notice the subway level, which I actually just went over again recently because it's blowing out in certain areas. The shadows are a lot better there because that's had about 3 or 4 iterations on it. But the farmhouse I actually knocked up in a day to get done for this video. So yeah.
It looks really cool. Let me screen share your game real quick. I want to just give everybody a little preview of what you're working on there. And then Greg, I also kind of want to hear about your education game too and see where that's going.
So a little bit of a caveat. Unity approached me about making this video, and I wanted to use, they approached me about making the video with the game I was creating because I'd shown it internally at Unity. And the caveat is there was no Steam page when they approached me. And I was like, oh crap, I've got to build a Steam page. So I threw this together really quick. Like this, I'm really impressed with how quickly Steam turns this stuff around. Like this was this was done and up in 3 days. So with all the imagery and all the rest of it, I mean, some of the imagery had already been there because I had some of the stuff in the menu that had all been put together. But the screenshots are going to get better, and there's no trailer video in there at the moment. It's all a bit placeholder.
Nice. Well, everybody can go grab it or add it to their wish list at least.
There's one thing you should check. If you follow Chris, you know how to market your game. He says one thing at the start of every single thing. Every time someone sends him a Steam page, he says, "This is my fail or pass grade." If you click the name, does it go to a developer page? That's his number one. You fail or you pass. So what happens when you click Warped Imagination? If it goes to a search page, that's a fail. If it goes to, there you go, that's a fail. So it's supposed to go to your producer page. So that's your homework. Go fix that.
Page. Oh, there you go. I'll fix that now.
Learn something new. All right. So yeah, Greg, on your learning game, what's the status there?
Well, they accepted my most recent update that had a bunch of bug fixes. And I made another video in my series on how to make a game for Legends of Learning. And they actually asked permission to link to my playlist from their YouTube's playlist. So if you go there, I posted a link in the chat here. If you go to their playlist on their channel, the very first thing in there is a link to my playlist. So that's kind of cool, driving a little traffic to my channel from Legends of Learning.
Yeah, that is definitely cool. It's I gotta get that screen up. My monitor is acting. I think it's my video card actually. The top is just flickering randomly. Yeah, check it out right there.
Yep. And I've been getting a lot of support requests on my Discord for tutorials I put up, like my how to publish to the App Store without a Mac. Been getting lots of questions about that. Somebody was asking me to do a video on using addressables in cloud content delivery so they could just have a bare bones application come up and then press a button to download the rest of the game data. And they were talking about like 5 gigabytes of game data. So gave them a little script to just kind of get them started with that. I also pointed them to a Cloud Monkey video on that topic.
Nice. It sounded like you're getting a lot of people learning stuff. It's actually pretty interesting. I'm curious about the iOS one. I mean, I've got my own solution. What was yours, the high level?
So I'm using, it depends on which project, but I either use what used to be plastic or what used to be, well, so I guess it's now Unity's version control. It used to be plastic, or I'll use GitHub or GitLab, depending on what. But I have a post-build bash script that will take the signed app that I built through Unity's DevOps, and it will push it up to App Store Connect just using your iTunes credentials. And so it seems like where people get hung up on the most was not putting the right credentials for their iTunes username and password into Unity's DevOps under the environment variables. Or there'll be a problem with the path to the IPA file. And so a lot of the resolving those problems is just to get them to go to look at the log file, look at where Unity says it put the file, and then look and see where the script is looking for it to upload it from. And then, just diagnosing the errors from the log. And they would think that the build succeeded and that it ought to be on test flight. But then if you go and look at the log, you can see the post-build script failed, either because it couldn't authenticate with App Store Connect or because it couldn't find the IPA file or something along those lines.
Do you have to hard code in your credentials into the Bash script, or can you get them from somewhere else?
So in the Bash script, you've got the iTunes username and iTunes password environment variable. And then you actually put it in your build configuration in Unity's cloud build.
Ah, okay. I was like that. I mean, that sounds really good, but like, oh, if you had to put that into a script somewhere,
actually,
that's not
one of the guys asking for help posted in the clear on my Discord his Bash script where he had put in his iTunes credentials, and I messaged him privately and said, "You might want to go delete that post."
Yeah,
I want to go change those credentials.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So okay, it's interesting. I'm glad to see that it's doing so well. I think it's really cool getting that out there, doing the education stuff. It's really awesome. But Story, I'm curious what you've been up to. Been silent all call so far.
Yeah, I've been up to a bit. I've nothing to particularly announce just yet, but I'm building some things, working on a few things. Yeah, I've recently finished a contracting gig I was on, and so I've dusted off a few bits of equipment and trying to remember how to do a few things. And as I was saying to everyone here just before the call, I'm reevaluating my video workflows, and that's why I've ditched Adobe, which is tough after years of doing that. So I've kind of been teaching myself Resolve and all of its quirks, and yeah, so I've got a few things in the pipeline, but nothing just yet to announce.
Okay, the biggest news that you're revealing is that you've switched to DaVinci Resolve.
Yeah, well, I've switched a lot of tools actually. I've also switched to Avid is it Avid? The Photoshop clone effectively, or the replacement. Yeah, I've switched a whole load of tools. Anything I could switch that gets me away from the Adobe claw. I have,
okay. Was that in response to the whole Adobe Fallout stuff that happened like 2 months ago, or just you're
no?
ready
It was in response to the downward spiraling numbers in my bank account mostly, because Adobe stuff isn't cheap. It's
Oh yeah.
So what was
what are you going to do with all that money you freed up now every year?
Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer. That's basically the equivalent of Photoshop and Illustrator. And what sold me is they can't export in PSB formats and PSD, so you can still use them in with the integrations in Unity for PSD files, which is what I wanted. Yeah, I'm not super sold on that just yet. I've also got Krita in the works, which is a free version of kind of it's a bit more of a painterly tool, but it's got some nice toys in there. And I also use CapCut for quick edits on things. So it's more than one tool, but I will say on balance, I'm definitely a huge proponent now of Resolve. I should have switched an awful lot sooner.
Nice. So I'm gonna have to try out your photo editing tool, because I realize that's the only Adobe thing I have, and I use it maybe like once a week for about a minute or two to go in and crop something. I do zero actual art, so it could actually be a good idea for me as well. All right, Harrison.
Yes.
What's new in your world, and are you ready to start talking a little bit about the design patterns and the command pattern? I feel like that'd be good time to jump into that topic once you tell us what's new.
I'm not doing it. I'm literally taking a break. I'm trying to figure out what to do next.
Okay.
This book took 2.5 years to do. I didn't want to like start something like the next week and be like, and without thinking about it. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. So we'll see how it goes. I got another week or two. We got to figure out what the next project is.
Okay. Well, maybe somebody in chat will have an idea.
Yeah. Design Patterns 2 Electric Boogaloo. Is that the goal?
Right? Well, when we were talking to Jason the other day, I was like, well, I could just put the second half up on GitHub like Robert Nystrom, and just put it'll be like whatever the switch of a primer would be, like an appendix to the reference book. And it'll have all the patterns that got cut.
Yeah. It might not be bad. I wonder how that does for his book, because I feel like that web page does a really good job of marketing it, but I don't know how many people are like me and buy the book as well.
Right. I mean, I bought the book too. I bought the book in print too, but like it's got to be doing something, because he's got thousands of reviews, so somebody's doing something with it. but like, have you guys read his new one? Oh man, it hurts my head.
No.
How to make your own. You should go look. What is it? How to make your own programming language? I think it is.
Oh.
It's nuts.
I admit I haven't looked
He
at that
wrote it-
stuff in a very long time. I certainly haven't seen the latest of his books, but I remember when I first looked into it, going down the rabbit hole of lectures and parsers and writing your own stuff for that. I assume it's all that avenue, which is
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a little hardcore. You have to be ready. It's like 1,000. It's like 1,100 pages. You got to be ready. You got to have a lot of time. I did not finish it yet.
It's this one.
I don't know. Scroll up. Crafting interpreters. That's it.
It makes sense that he's got it as a web page with the name of the book and matching
exactly.
the same pattern as the last one. I'll drop a
Right.
link to this in chat for anybody who wants to check it out too. Assume it's kind of the same thing. Oh no, this one's download a sample, not the whole ebook.
It's nice to be humbled every now and again.
Yeah, it's interesting to learn too, because it's one of those things, like most programming stuff, which bleeds into pretty much everything else. Once you understand that a lot of this basically is syntax trees and tokenization, you'll start to see it in search engines, in autocompletes, in anytime there's IntelliSense, anything. It's all the same exact principles in terms of how it functions. And then you start getting into the Boolean tree evaluators, and it's how rule engines work for things like searches in terms of building custom those sort of nested searches and things. A lot of this stuff is the same principles, but obviously at the lowest level when you're making a language.
Yeah.
All right, now let's talk about yours a little bit.
right.
Robert's not on here, so we'll talk about your book. We got you. This one's the updated one. You want to just give everybody a quick overview of what the book is, and then we'll dive in. I really want to talk about the command pattern part of it today.
All right, that's fair. So this is my Unity answer to Gang of Four and Robert Nystrom's book. But it's also, I would say, we'll do the reverse. It's my C# answer, and Unity is nice to look at, and it's nice to implement. And I after the other book I wrote, I kept getting questions about like where to go and what to do, and what to do next. And architecture and design patterns and systems always comes up. And then the next question is always, oh, cool, where's the book for that? What's the link? And I go, oh, I don't have one. I'm so sorry. I can't help you. And so I spent some time reading and researching and translating. I feel like I was just translating a bunch of stuff into like more workable systems. But yeah, so this is like a reference book. Every chapter starts with basically a client and usually a non-implemented system with some kind of mechanic or feature that you need to build, and you learn the design pattern through that. You build a feature, and then at the end we go into pattern variations, how to customize things, usually how to do it with generics if it's applicable, and almost always with scriptable objects because they're very handy in most of these, I'd say. In almost every pattern, scriptable objects play a part in the last few pages. But yeah, I just wanted, I always write, I always end up making courses and writing books for what I needed when I was in college and right after when I went into my first job. And this would have helped me a lot. So that's kind of who I wrote it for. It is like, it does start every chapter. It's like super basic, bare bones, and then you build up to something intermediate to advanced. So it's got a little bit for everybody, but it is not beginner, but like early in career, let's say, focused.
Yeah.
So for people that already know this stuff, it might seem a little basic, but I struggled a lot with reading Gang of Four and game programming patterns like 10 years ago. And I was, that was hard. Like, that's hard when you don't have anybody to ask questions to, and it's not in your programming language. Like, I know enough C++ to be dangerous, but I still couldn't make a game. Like, I couldn't implement the solutions, like the snippets into a real, project and make it work. So it's hard when there's nothing hands-on that you can like take apart and see what your changes change. Because I feel like that's how I learn, at least.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And just being in the language where you understand and really completely grasp all of the stuff that's going on, and not just like I mostly get it because the syntax is close. Like you read through the Uncle Bob's books in Java or the design patterns book in C++. Like it's all like I said, it's close and you get an idea, but you can't. It's harder to visualize how it would necessarily apply into your exact project versus something like this, where I think you've got that pretty down. It's very Unity specific and lots of scriptable objects, which I think are the answer in most of those scenarios. So I think it's really helpful there. And speaking of the beginning parts of each chapter, and it's like in the command one, you start off with like the most basic type of command, and you went in with kind of an input system. I was curious why you started there.
Well, I don't know. I always talk about this. The command pattern was difficult to teach because it's like two sub patterns that are put together, and a lot of the time when you go and learn it, no one tells you that there are two different kinds of command. It's that you can have state and stateless commands, and that makes it very difficult to grasp what problems this actually solves. And so I wanted to have two very different examples that use each one but are in the same project, so you can see that like the actual difference of how to implement like hotkey mapping, which is the non-state one where you can just swap them out and it doesn't matter what they are, versus the second one we do where it's stateful command behavior. So like having, like an XCOM thing where you can kind of switch people or have bots play on your team. And those are completely different. It's still a command pattern, but it's very different in terms of how you apply it. And so that's why I started with the easier one with no state, because it's just delegation, but it's very like intentional. It's very targeted, and it's much easier, I think, to understand than managing state, than like having an undo and then like introducing like, oh, we can have a history, we can have a command history, and you can do an undo and redo stack as much as you want. And how do you do that? And like, how do you have, fun mechanics in that? So that's why I chose to start with the hotkey,
to kind of give that comparison. that makes a lot of sense, because I know I was reading through it and I was looking, I was like, the first part, like I kind of understand, but you probably wouldn't really implement it. And the second part, you would definitely, I could see implementing it in a lot of spots. But I can understand the reason though for showing that difference. Have any of you guys read through this chapter yet?
Yeah.
Okay. Greg, did you have thoughts on it?
Yeah, I like the way you gave kind of a non-standard example by using like different types of combat, like doing a melee combat or, whatever range, shoot command and so forth. Because most of the time when people demonstrate the command pattern, they typically do like UI, just input stuff, where you can.
Yeah.
So I really like that you picked sort of a non-standard use case.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I did like a couple of the patterns are really best applicable to like either UI or like settings or data management that doesn't look like, you don't see anything happening too much. Like you see the system working, but you're right. Like I thought if you're actually going to have stateful commands and you're going to track that, like have it show, like have it visually backtrack itself or redo itself.
I cheated.
It would be easier.
When I was scripting a video to teach the command pattern years ago, which didn't make it to production, but I still have various parts of it in places, I got a friend of mine who's an artist to make a literal TV remote control that looked like the old Sky remotes. And it was a first-person little experience, and you could point it at things, and you could then press the buttons to move it up, down, left, right, or press buttons. And I demonstrated it. We just raycast select the object and run the appropriate command with an interface of like up, down, left, right, or change color or whatever. And then the remote had a big undo button and a redo button on it. And so the idea would be you'd walk around the world, you'd interact with stuff, and then you'd press the undo, redo, and it was a very visual representation of commands bound to keys that could interact with stuff, and you could rebind the keys, and you could each object hit state that you could then subsequently rewind. And I was trying to like have my cake and eat it too, with like what you were saying, trying to explain both the fact
it's hard.
It's hard to find a good metaphor to explain the concepts.
It's hard, and if you teach it all bundled up, which is what happens, or you teach like it's a weird like oil and vinegar kind of mix where they're never equal, and it's hard to show people like where each one is applicable. Because if you want to use both, that's fine. But I felt like that was a disservice to teach it that way. if this is your first time trying to like bundle behavior and just kind of send it down the line and have it execute without knowing what it is. I'm looking at my copy. What else did we do?
Now, Dave, is this I assume something you've used multiple times? Is it something you're using in your current game? Command pattern for anything?
Yeah, I've got some behaviors that sit on a command pattern that you can launch off, and they play as they go along. Not mono behaviors, like sub behaviors.
I mean, don't you even have a command stack for your asset? I mean, you can undo your history selection back, can't you? I could have sworn you had that.
Yeah, there's a video coming out on Tuesday that shows how that actually works. But yeah, maybe I've done the video and then I looked at it and went, yeah, this is just like, I explain all the code and then I went, oh, I'm going to have to put a section in this that literally is just a diagram of stuff going into a linked list, coming out, going into the current, going back into the stack, coming out of the stack, going back into the linked list. It's just a whole thing that is there that I've got to.
Oh, you make graphics, huh?
Yeah, there's got to be a graphic, because I sat there going, right, okay, I'm gonna put this together, and then I'm explaining the code, and I'm like, yeah, so this is the last selection that goes into the thing selection that goes into this, that goes back to this, and then when you press this, it comes into this. And I just went, I'm just tongue-tied. It took me ages because I was getting tongue-tied in literally just doing the script, like going back and forth. So yeah, that's coming out. But yes, I do have a history selection tool that comes out. But yeah, I suppose that is the command pattern, but it's so loose. But it's not a sexy one. It's not an interesting sort of thing. Processes of how you basically shoot a gun and then have things happening once the gun shoots and when they can get cancelled and all the stuff going on there. I personally don't teach design patterns in my videos because I don't need the headache of people coming at me asking me to do more of them. I tend to go on these are tools and this is how to build a video game
that's
without
smart,
all the stuff around it.
If
It
you
leaves
keep
it
it
open for
open
him.
every so often you'll find a random video about design patterns on YouTube, and you'll find me actually in the comments, which I always try not to do, but every so often it's just like, well not really. I have to. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I use all these different patterns across my game, from service locators to all the rest of it. And I've said a few things in some like talks and stuff, but I leave it to people that are better at explaining, better at teaching than I am, to basically go into that sort of work.
Yeah, well, out of all the patterns, I feel like it's at least in my top 3 of ones that I feel like developers should know, because there's so many different just random uses. I mean, I think you already covered your scene tool just randomly out of nowhere, but I feel like it just pops in like everywhere as a very useful way to get things done. Story, you use it a lot?
I'm half writing one as we speak. I basically I do an awful lot of stuff with state management. But we're talking about UI. I may or may not be working on something at the moment where I'm trying to explain the difference of state management separate from the UI side of it, because what bothers me is the idea that a lot of games you can't manipulate the state in a way that seems to make logical sense if you're not a programmer. What I mean is, practically speaking, there's no reason why you couldn't be middle of a game, pause state, and go specifically to the audio tab of a settings menu and just modify something and come back. But by the sheer nature of the architectural design of most Unity games, you have to save state, exit, go to the other menu, load the appropriate scene, and go into the thing. And so I think explaining state conceptually, and how to suspend state, and the idea of trickling or watering things down is something I'm currently working on. And long story short, in order to do all of that, you need to fire commands into a system, and so you need to have some form of command management. And then of course, if you do that, you often want to navigate, and our navigation is going to need undoing and redoing, so you've inherently got the need for commands there too. And then as another aside to all of that, I like the fact that if you've got state management, you often want to jump to a particular state, at which case you want to be able to have bound state to certain actions. At that point, you've basically got a keybinder, and so it's all pretty much wrapped in the same principal idea. It's all one pattern that solves like 7 of the most common stuff around a state, you know.
Yeah, I feel like it's like almost as prolific as the observer pattern. Like it's almost as many spots, probably like number 3 for the most used. So anybody have anything else on command pattern stuff? We're going to keep the show kind of short today, and I want to talk about crunching a little bit too, but if there's more command pattern stuff, we'll have to dive in.
Yeah, I want Unity to redo their last video on it because that made me cringe.
What was the last video on it? I don't remember.
Is it the one? I believe it was the one where they had the robot in a kitchen talking about cooking things, and yeah, I didn't like it.
Was this the accompany one? Was the command pattern part of their design pattern like ebook? Was that one of them? I know they did the observer and state. They do command too.
Yeah, the ebook was okay, but it was a video they done a few short videos, and a couple of them were okay, and then I believe it was the command pattern one that was the one in the kitchen. Send it to the robot and the robot does it, or you can undo it, and it goes into this sort of thing. And it was just so far removed from any sort of game or anything. I was just like,
the one that kills me, the metric I look for with a lot of YouTube videos is the who's your audience metric. So whenever I watch any YouTube video, I ask myself, who did this person have in their mind when they made the video? And something you see all the time, and it's like, again, if I see it within the first few minutes, I'm like, I'm just writing this content off. I'm sorry. It's just, it means you're not connecting the way I would value for me. Is basically, if they have this disjointed understanding of the relationship between what skill level the person has versus what you're teaching. A good example of this is when you watch a video and it says, right, we're going to teach this intermediate concept called the design pattern. And you go into all this stuff. Okay, yeah, fine. Now, to use Unity, click File, go to like, okay, who is this? Someone who has never used Unity but is learning it. Like,
well, first you got to download the hub, Jason.
Yeah, it's like, that to me is such a lack of that means that somebody is hitting the notes of like, how do I get to the answer? And it's like, you don't understand who you're talking to, and so the content can't be good by design because you're not actually describing it for an audience, and that immediately makes me just go, and I'm out. I can't pay attention to this anymore.
Yeah, important to hit the target, right?
And not to rip on the person that made the video too much, but like there needs to be some thought put into something.
You hate them, and
yeah, basically in a nutshell. No,
I have no idea who made it. I'm gonna find out though. And
I know they're gonna be on Slack later on.
You know what Dave said?
How dare you talk about me like that? No, they made some really good videos around that one. It's just that one turned up, and not around the whole design patterns videos. They made some nice ones, but then and their ebooks were nice, and some of the things they were doing were good. It's just that one just made me go cringe. It was the artwork as well. I've always complained about, and I know I shouldn't, but if you're a big company like Unity and you start putting out demos, make them look nice. Unity, like use your engine and make them pretty. I don't want to see your gray box version of it unless you're teaching gray boxing. Like if you come out and tell me you're going to show me a multiplayer game, and they did this with some multiplayer game stuff. They came out with really nice looking demos, and I was like, that looks really good. And then I watched another one, and I'm like, why is there capsules running around? Like, come on, make it look good at least. And there's a
what was the first one that was really good? The tanks, the World of Tanks clone. Like for,
you see,
for
World of Tanks. Yeah, that was tidy.
I thought that was great.
That was good. The UI
was awesome. That was great.
Yeah, the UI killed me, but the rest of it, was good. And that's what I want to see from those sort of demos from those sort of big companies. Because you then go and see an Unreal demo and you're like, okay, I can see why people are getting obsessed with this thing because it looks gorgeous on all their demos they put out because they have a dedicated art team coming out to that. And again, I understand budgets, I understand how this plays through and all the rest of it. And I understand who you're teaching it to. If you're teaching it to engineers, they probably don't give a shit. It's probably just me. I'm probably the problem here, not them. But yeah. And now somebody's going to go back through all my videos and go, you see this video you did with capsules where you wander around? Yeah. Look
at that. There's not even a material. There's just not even a shader on the material. It's just.
I'm going to defend the the capsule creators unite over here, because like I'm very much a fan of the whole grey boxing aesthetic, simply because I think that. But I do agree on the appearance thing, because what bothers me is when I see people who have a demo scene and it just looks garbage, even if it's a grey box. Because the truth is, you can make anything look good. You can put a capsule on a rectangle, you turn on the fog, you add a bit of post-processing so it has like that dark Aces look to it, you add a vignette, and already it's going to look good. And then the icing on the cake, add some ambient occlusion, and everything looks 10 times better. It doesn't matter, you're done. Like that alone will make every demo scene look really good. It's when I see the default Unity sky and the default texture, it's like, okay, now we've got a problem.
And don't get me wrong, there is a time and a place to be like. If you
I was
want
gonna
to
say, I'm really now. I feel like I should apologize because my whole book is that.
No, there's a time and place. Like when you're teaching the technique and all the rest of it, then fine, you get your capsules out and you talk about your async processes and all your stuff in the multiplayer. But when you're demonstrating how good your engine is,
it's showing off.
That is the thing they're doing with some of these things. It kills me. I mean, okay, I'm going to be that arsehole and go on about the fact that when they showed one of the last videos and they had the big castle scene up and they were talking about how good the performance was, the thing hit 30 frames and they're constantly going on about it's hitting 30 frames, it's hitting 30 frames. And it's like, they're not talking about it. It's just a counter in the corner. And it's like, buy a better computer. You're literally showing this in a showcase. And have it come out with really good performance on that better computer. You could put the specs up on screen so it's not hidden behind everything. But when you're going on about how much better performance you're getting out, if your computer's hitting that sort of level in a big demonstration, then you've got an issue. Like you're not sure. People are looking at that going, right, okay, cool. But I'm now going to go and look at this nanite thing that's hitting ridiculous frames and looks fantastic. But yeah, they're running it on a super box, but it's just for me, it's a marketing thing. Maybe it's just a marketing thing. Maybe I'm just that arsehole, but I'm just like,
no, but you're right. For the engine, like, can you imagine if Sony came out to E3 with a PlayStation 6 and put it on, a retro VCR TV and just was like, yeah, look how awesome this is. Yeah, look how great this new game is.
So I'll give you a hint on that. Like we done way back in the day, there was a PS3 demo, and people can look this up. It happened at E3 where everybody was watching the screen. It was Sony's latest thing. A car came up and somebody went out in a first-person view and shot the shit out of this car, blew this car up. The windows were smashing, the hubs were falling off, the car was lowering because the tires got blown up. Were blown up just by bullets and all the rest of it. And everybody went crazy. That's an amazing looking thing. And it's running on the PS3. This is before the PS3 came out and we were doing it. There was nothing in that world. As story says, there were some clever techniques to make the world look really good, but there was nothing in there. It was the car and you were shooting it. That would never have been a game. However, it looked really good because the performance was known on the real PS3 that wasn't out yet to be good enough. But on those dev kits, it wasn't kicking that level. So there's some smoke and mirrors in there for some of this stuff. And if you explain that in your videos when you're talking about it, fine. But when you're showing off a new console, new engine, or anything like that, I just want to see the performance up a little bit higher. That's just me. Maybe it's just me. But yeah.
No, I think it's important. Good performance and good visuals on all of the demos that are not like just a technical how-to thing, but especially anything that's like lighting and rendering related. That said, though, the Cinemachine ones, they're pretty gray box, but with a slightly interesting character. And I think that one turned out really well, like as far as the demo goes, because it's light enough weight that you can just go grab and copy anything that you want from there, and it shows all the stuff. But it still looks pretty cool with the characters that they've got set up for it. The little light eyeball character guy. Have you played with the Cinemachine 3 yet?
No.
Oh, you should upgrade. It's definitely.
I know. I've just got
better
so
and
much
it's easy.
I've got loads of things doing, and there's so much more I've got to get done that it's on the list. At the moment, I've got the cutscenes in there. You can see the subway train coming in, and then there's the bit
if you've already got stuff set up, I wouldn't worry about it. But if you were setting up a new one, I'd use the new version.
And I know how to use the old version with all its quirks and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
The new version, I've seen it, I've tried it. I'm not putting it out in videos or anything like that yet, and it's not going into my production. But yeah, it's a lot simpler to do the stuff that was a lot more complicated before. But once you knew the complicated stuff and you knew how cinematography worked and all the rest of it, you got the way the old thing worked. There's just some quirkiness to it. And then when you hook into it in your own code to change the level of the cameras going up and the blending and all the rest of it, that is just, it's a magic box in a sense, some of the API around that. But once you get a handle on it and you've got it working, it's one of those things where sometimes you feel such an accomplishment by getting things working, and then they change it to make it better. You're like, no, I don't want to.
No, stick with the one that I did. Put it
I
on
made that
work
big accomplishment to get it there thing, and I'm not going to get anything new from it. So I'm just going to stick with the way it works. But that's not to say. That's not to say once I switch to production. Like at the moment, I'm working towards the visual slice, the vertical slice of the game. And once I've gone to the vertical slice of the game, then I'll switch to production. Character creation tools will come in. A lot of the stuff where I've got command pattern sort of stuff where I've got loads of behaviors being fired off by a certain thing, they'll start to get blended into that's a cutscene, because I've got things that disable player input and then change the camera and then fade to black, change the camera, fade out, do this. And they're all nodes at the moment that run when something happens. That will all get zipped into a thing that you just go, yeah, this is a cutscene, drop it on and go. But that will only happen when production happens. And it's the same with the Cinemachine. If I look at it and go, okay, this is a lot easier to use, which it is, I will then go at the production, when I switch to production, okay, swap everything out into Cinemachine, the new one, change the old stuff, spend that month just doing code updating, making those presets, and then working into the rest, and then moving on with it. And that's what I do. That's my process.
Okay. Sounds like a smart one. You don't want to just go in and upgrade it right away and see what happens?
No, because you got to get the funny thing is, if you keep updating your prototype and you keep going, oh, there's a new thing out, there's shiny, I'm going to do that, you'll never finish. You'll just be there all day going, oh, new lighting engine, I'm going to go and do that.
But there's a new thing you could learn, Dave. You could go find out.
I am not one of those people. This is one of those warning things with design patterns. They're addictive. Like, they're really addictive. Once you get in there, you're like, oh, I just learned a new design pattern, and that would change loads of things in my game. And I could do, if it's not going to give you more performance,
go
it's not hurting
the whole thing.
Maybe wait till your next game to start putting it in there. But
I tried to say that in the last.
You can just rewrite it from scratch.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying in the last show, is that it's very easy. I was trying to warn people of that very thing, is that it happens, that it's fun to play with. And so once you start getting into that mindset, it's like you basically have been taught how to use a screwdriver, and you're walking around going, where can I use the screwdriver? And you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble and possibly electrocute yourself. So you're better off not approaching it that way.
It fits right in there, story. Literally, the hole is exactly the same size. How are you supposed to do? You got one for the round screwdriver and one for the flat one. At least over here you do. All right. Before we go, I wanted to talk about one other topic too, which was crunching. And the main reason is that it's on my mind because for like the last 2 weeks, I've been working like 12, 16-hour days trying to get a release out and ready for the App Store before school starts. And I'd forgotten how much I hate crunching. And to be fair with this is I would put most of the blame on myself, since technically I'm leading the team that's crunching right now. But I'm curious. Well, first, I'm thinking about ways to make sure this doesn't happen again, so that you don't have to work crazy ass hours and have super tight deadlines. But this is one of those scenarios where, just like with consoles, the deadline, it's locked and there's nothing you can do about it. It's set in there. This one is based around when schools start. For everybody to know, leading a team working on a really popular kids game in schools, at least in the US. It's called Bottle. I got the hoodie on. You can go check it out. But it's my son's favorite game. And yeah, I can't change the release date. We can't push it back or anything. So it's got to happen, and everything has to kind of happen right at the end. Things kind of get a little bit crazy, but I'm curious what everybody else's history and thoughts are on crunch stuff. Typically in the past, it's not really been a huge issue, other than when we had a big MMO release coming out. Like we had an update coming out and all the marketing was there. Like we had to get it by that date. And it'd be like maybe like a week or two near the end where half of the team was going crazy on stuff. But I've also known people where like they spent 6 months, working at Rockstar, crunching on stuff nonstop. And like the whole team was there doing it, and they're basically just locked in eating there all day. I've never been in that situation, wouldn't stay in that situation. And it's one of the things I'm going to fix in this one, but I'm curious what you guys think. What are your experiences? I don't know who wants to jump in. It seems like Dave's got a lot on his mind just by his eyes.
Yeah, so I spent 7 years in AAA and then 7 years in building indie games, indie game studios, and then I went enterprise. At enterprise, we still had crunch every now and again because we had big shows. So I'd done display systems for the Super Bowl, Lollapalooza, and all the rest of it. There was no way I could ring up the person doing the Super Bowl and go, "Yeah, so that display system we're going to do, can you put off the date by a month because like,
we're
not quite ready with that sort of thing, and we're going to change it." Yeah, it had to happen at that particular point. And some things have to give. Sometimes as a manager, you have to make a decision to turn around and go, okay, that feature we had planned, chop it, save it for the sequel. It might hurt us in the long run, but we might not get it done. It might be buggy when it comes out, EA. And it might not make the grade on what we want to do. We're not putting our best foot forward. Now, I got into trouble once when I'd done a talk and people asked me about the AAA experience in a crunch. And I turned around and said, "Oh yeah, I enjoyed it." And everybody went, "What?" And I got in trouble. And then I had to put an explainer in there. I was early 20s. We were in London and we had a pub next door. We used to go and get a couple of beers, go back in, play video games and build video games. I was living the dream as far as I was concerned. But I explained at the time, there were people on there that had kids and families and had responsibilities that had to go somewhere. And the idea of being in the office for 16, 18 hours just wasn't compatible. And also we were in central London. Nobody lived there. They all had to travel out to go to the places they were in. So crunch wasn't just those hours they were in. It was also looking at how the hell do I get home at this point? Because of the time I mean, in a lot of game studios.
You sleep on the couch. What are you talking about?
There was one guy, yeah. And yeah, people did sleep under the desk and all the rest of it. I never had to sleep
in a lot
under
of the
desk.
offices at Sony.
Yeah, we really did. And we had rooms and stuff that people would go and hide off in. And there was a guy who used to sleep under his desk all the time because he loved working.
There was a guy that made his cube into a room. He put a door on it and a roof.
Some people don't mind it, but it is bad. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not a good thing. And half of it comes down to pressures from upper management on changes they've made at the last minute, features that they want to see. You find that sometimes the team will come up with a brilliant idea and you see somebody and then they realize what that would mean and they shut up. They're just like, because they know if they say about that feature, the manager there who's got no real idea what's going on turns around and goes, "We need that." And you're like, right, you just added this much extra to the time that we've got to do to get out. You need a really good producer. And a lot of the AAA games I was in had an amazing producer. So even though we crunched on certain period, it was incredibly short. I'm talking 1-2 days or something like that. Whereas you see some companies go on forever. And it's because the producer knew how to push back, knew how to schedule everything correctly, and knew how to give really good updates, and knew how to drop, knew how to just turn around and go, "This feature's not happening because the game's not happening properly if we do it." So for indies, it's a bit different. You don't usually have a producer. It's usually you and 3 other people knocking out a title. And some, especially in my first couple of indies, we didn't really mind again because it was our baby that we were putting out. We wanted to see it go out with the best foot forward. So we'd put that extra effort in. And again, we were still quite young. I don't have a family, so it doesn't, I don't have those restrictions on what goes on. And my wife is more than happy for me to go away. So crunch is one of those things that it's all about time management, feature management, as far as I'm concerned. And if you don't manage those things, you can put yourself in a bad situation.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally agree. That's why I got to fix it. Speaking of time management, Harrison's got to go. So thanks again for...
I got to jump, guys. I'll see you next time.
All right. We'll talk more about some more patterns next time. Talk to you later, Harrison. All right. Yeah. Anybody else got thoughts on Crunch story, Greg?
Am I the only one on the stream that's in enterprise development now?
Right now?
No,
Isn't Jason is doing some.
I think we've all done enterprise development in the past,
Yeah.
at the very least, which was
Certainly not normally, but yeah.
sometimes crunchy. But normally, my experience with crunch on enterprise stuff is like I've got 13 hours of meetings for no reason. It's not really like I've got a lot of code to write. It's I've got a lot of people I have to talk to, and it's going to be all day, every day, like 8-hour meetings that last all day, and then I've got to do work, like they last all week.
Yeah, I will say that the company I'm working for now is pretty good about really encouraging good work-life balance. They will even excuse you from meetings. Like we have weekly like technology meetings and product meetings and stuff that you're encouraged to attend, but if you've got work to do, they're fine with you skipping those to do your work. And I don't really feel a lot of pressure to put in extra time at work. Which is really nice because I have worked in the past for companies where, I mean, if you weren't putting in a lot of extra time, it's like you just didn't care about the company, you were just there for a paycheck if you weren't so invested in the company that you were willing to put in 10, 12, 14 hours a day.
Yeah, but the company, your company is a team, not a family. I like that concept around it. Like you join a team, you can leave a team and join another team. Like it's always a red flag to me when I go into an interview or I'm talking to a company about coming in and helping them do something and that we're a family. You're like, oh yeah, you're not going to like me because I don't go in for that. It's a team and teams change.
Yeah, I've been conflicted on that one because there was someone disagreeing with me with last time this topic came up because my mentality is, well, I agree on the family side of it. That's always a run for the hills moment when a company describes themselves as a family. I will say, if you're working with a team of people, I do consider it like an army, and you're going to go into battle together. And the fact is, well, I don't care. I don't want the company acting like we're a family. I want brothers at arms or whatever to feel like we are. And something that is a problem for me is that idea that it is true that some people genuinely are just there to like clock in and clock out. And while I understand that's the case, there is a level of buy-in expected when it's not just you. When you're working with a project where there's a graph of responsibility where people have to get things done, and some people are more than happy to sort of go, well, time for me to clock out. And it's like, yeah, but if you clock out now and don't spend the next 10 minutes finishing that, these next 3 people will have to stay for another few hours because of whatever you were doing would have supported them doing their bit. And that level of sort of just playing the corporate game annoys me because that's people forgetting the human element on both sides. It's one thing to say that companies treat people like cattle or whatever. It's a whole other thing when you've got people who are happy to kind of just say, I'll just look after myself and not my team. And so I'm very much of the mindset that a lot of corporate culture leads itself to an internal warfare where people act like they're all internally fighting, and that's self-imposed because it's down to either lack of understanding of other people's priorities or just a general me versus the enemy argumentation. And while a company is obviously going to try to trick you into the whole like we're a family so you'll forgo your family and favor us instead, obviously ignore that. But the other end is still true, is that there is still a hierarchy and relationship and things to be aware of. And I found the higher up the chain you go in your career to like have to deal with those things, the more you no longer think it's cool when one of the programmers is like, not my problem, and whistles out the door, and think, cool, because now you've just left a big giant turd on my doorstep, and this is just going to downstream to everybody else, and that's not a cool thing to do. That's just you actively making a problem for everybody else. So I find it's a bit harder to give a blanket, yes, no to that. I think it's a lot more down to the attitude of the person themselves. Like, I don't mind sacrificing some of my time to support others. I won't make it become a standard, but I like to be known as someone who's reliable, and I'll go out of my way to help sometimes, but you'd better know when you're pushing your luck. That's my general philosophy.
And that's the team methodology. If you're not putting in the effort in the team, you don't stay in the team. It's still a team effort. It's still a team effort to get things across the line. It's not a family situation. It's not a family where you're going to have to be together forever, whatever happens, sort of thing. You can move on from that. If your upper management literally just sits there and crunches you constantly feeds you new features, constantly is changing the the line that you've got to cross without changing the line you've got to get, that you're going, the timeline. They're not changing the timeline, but they're changing the feature line. If it constantly happens, you're burning out. And burnout is, it's something I never really heard in enterprise. Like all the time I was in enterprise, and I was in enterprise before I went into video games, and I've been in enterprise since, and nobody really talked about burnout that much. But in video games, it's a constant thing that we spoke about. Oh, they're burning out. And part of that was because the passion was there. People really wanted to get that thing done, and they worked themselves more than they should do. There was a guy once that was forced to go on holiday because he had literally accrued so much holiday that HR was panicking. Like, they're like, this guy could take 2 months, 3 months off. Like, we really can't see that happen. They have to start taking, and he was forced to take holiday. And yeah, he was really upset about it. He's like, I'll just give it up. And they're like, yeah, you legally can't do that. Like, we legally can't pay you out or anything like that.
No, they can pay him out. They just don't want to.
You could have donated it.
Yeah,
Some companies let you donate your PTO to other employees.
Really?
Mhm.
I've never heard of that before. Oh, nice. Yeah, no, not the companies I
Dave,
work for.
after crunches, what have you typically done, and what have you seen the teams you worked on do?
So again, it depends on what your company is. I mean, there are companies that, as I say, abuse the whole idea.
The ones that aren't abusing it, the ones that aren't in permanent crunch mode where they just have to get to making a profit.
The problem you've got now is a lot of the games that come out are live games. So it's not like there's a line. You get to the line and then suddenly the game is live and you're like, let's take a breather and all the rest of it, like it used to be. We used to have games where you would finish, you'd crunch up to that last line, you'd be like, we've got it out. It would go on disc and go to the somebody would buy it in the store, take it to the console, and that was it. You know, and then there started to be updates and all the rest of it. PS3, you can update.
Yeah, this is the Parkinson's law problem, right? It's like the classic, any project will expand to fill the time allotted. And so that's the classic, like if you give me a 2-week project and you only give me a week to do it, it'll still probably take 2 weeks, if not more. You can't really fix that. If it's 2 weeks and you give me 2 weeks, it might be a couple of days over. If you give me a month, it'll take a month. You give me a year, it'll take a year. Like regardless, it's just the way that tends to work because people's attitudes relax to it. And so likewise, if you've got a game where it's a live service, there isn't a deadline. So it's like, this is always forever. So everything is just always on all of the time. And so that can be very stressful. Yeah.
And the other problem is you get some groups that will add so many last minute features and so many changes and then wonder why it's buggy that it goes out the door. You're like, yeah, because QA wasn't there. You know, didn't have enough QA to pass through this stuff to get it over the line. And then it goes out slightly buggy and suddenly you're doing the patch and that patch is even more crucial. And you've got to get the crunch time in to do that patch. Again, it comes down to production, your timeline, your feature set, and how you lay this stuff out. If you don't do that properly, you're going to hurt yourself going forwards. Now, going back in history and putting a nice note in there, we'd finish a game. They'd give us tons of time off. Like they're like, go refresh, go sort yourself out. And half of the time, that was so the producers could sit down and go, what's next? Like, where is this team going? And you saw that in a lot of AAA where they go, they finished the game. Let's get rid of them all while we work out what we're going to get the next game on, and then we'll hire them all back afterwards. Except those few programmers, because we'll never get them back. So yeah, and that was a different problem in some of the studios that I'd worked at.
Yeah, thankfully from my side, I've never worked on that end of it. So for me, it was mostly working more back end, and so almost all the stuff that I did, people treated it like just a normal hardware or software shop rather than games, because you're working on database stuff or APIs or anything that's like tangential enough that like you never get that level of the way people treat it is like they would treat any other enterprise problem. And so if anything, what I found for our stuff was usually that there was a huge disconnect between the classic expectation of delivery versus the work you have to do. And it ends up being a lot of that sort of like, this is a rush only because you chose to give it to us now. The actual work isn't that hard. The time is perfectly reasonable, but you forgot about us despite us having to implement it. You've just like made all of your plans, did all the back and forth, did all the stuff on your side. And then, but then at the last minute said, oh, here you go. Here's the finished spec. That could have been given to us a month or two earlier, and it could have been a very easy project all around. So that's one that does frustrate me, is when you see people not respecting other people's process in a project. So I always try to make sure that's why, for me, it's the big thing about what people know about each other's work. That to me is the number one caveat.
All right, Dave, you got to get going, and I think we're going to wrap stuff up in just a second. So thanks again for coming out, and everybody, if you didn't look at Dave's amazing asset on sale or check out his video, the video is linked in chat, but I'll put a link in the description as well. So we can go check that out. Go see Dave's recommendations and how he makes stuff pretty, and check out the full Dev Day sale. I put up my favorite assets on there as well. I'm actually working on a video too of some of the tools that I use daily. I mentioned this last week, I think. See you later, Dave. Sorry. You're going to get pulled away by his ear. Like that Hot Reload, Proxima, and there's a couple others that have been using relatively regular VTabs, and just to do a little one showing how I actually use them like day to day in the normal process. Especially, I think the Hot Reload one would be really helpful because a lot of people have been curious about that. I know we talked about that too, Story. And actually, 2 days ago, I had a call with a friend who's starting a game studio, and they had a bunch of Unity questions, and how to do exactly what Hot Reload was one of the questions. I was like, oh, it's funny that you asked that question, because they're coming from a JavaScript web side doing game stuff there, where they're used to, you write the code and then it instantly appears, and wanted to know how to get that kind of same pattern. I think hopefully that ends up being really helpful for everybody. But I'm gonna do a full video just kind of showing the actual workflows that I go through with some of those things. That, and like, have you used Proxima yet, Story? I don't know if you've done any mobile things since it came in front of you. Yeah, I've been doing with this game since it's largely on mobile and iPad and stuff. It's been super helpful too, because you can just remote in and see what's going on, and like it feels like I'm in the editor, and it makes it really, really quick. So some interesting things to just speed stuff up. But that video will come out probably next week. I think I'm gonna try to record it this weekend, if not next week, along with the rest of my command pattern architecture videos.
Funny enough, speaking of things to speed things up, I just thought I'd post this because it's just, I wasn't going to mention everything. It just seems funny when you're talking about it. I complained the last couple of days about how it annoys me about Unity's assets thing, where to install one of my own assets requires me to open and load the package manager. And so I ended up just going, actually, you know what? I've said it like in 2 different weeks in a row of like, this is annoying to me. So I just thought I'd make a thing to fix it. And so this is just a tiny little thing I made, which gives me an instant cached collection of all of my locally installed assets, and it just pops up an inline text dialog, and I can type, find an asset, and install it with one click, and I don't have to wait for the thing to load or do anything fancy. You'll see a little dialog thing that pops up, and it just installs whatever the asset is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just it's funny because I remember that's twice now I've complained about it. This is what I was saying. Literally, all it does is say, it might be hard to see. Hit the bottom, the little extend in the bottom right there, Jason. Might be a bit easier to spot. Yeah. So yeah, basically I have a little thing. It's a file that's a configuration, and you decide which packages and which assets get included, and then it'll install the ones that you assign, and I basically have a little dialogue. And it's actually surprisingly simple. That little search box, all I'm doing is I'm saying, go to my install directory, which is the Unity asset 5x directory, create a file which says it has these folders with these subfolders with these Unity packages in it, create a JSON file out of it, cache it locally, set a timestamp so it's like within the last X amount of time. And then every subsequent search I do will grab that file, cache it in memory, and do a quick search. There's a little bit of secret sauce on the search, because I have this whole library I have, which contains like a nested multi-search with sound X's and initialisms, and using all sorts of Levenstein weighting. So like the whole thing, just to make the search more like magical, where you can type like misspelled half the word Cyrenex and it'll still find Odin or whatever. But the general process of like, here's the assets, go find it. It was just one of those ones that I was like, this is all I wanted from the package manager. I just wanted to be able to say asset name. There it is. I shouldn't have to load a package manager, to load my own thing, to go to the web, to download. It's like, these are already on my machine. Show me the ones I have. Give me a button to click. So yeah, that's what I wanted.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I haven't. How often are you installing packages? I'm curious.
I do it often enough simply because I like doing little demo projects for people. I get a lot of like random questions for stuff. So I'll tell you how crazy it is for me. I have a custom batch scripts that will launch Unity with certain parameters. So, and I'm using Odin, or not Odin, I'm using Directory Opus. So literally, if I want to start a brand new project, I double click my desktop, opens up an Explorer window. I press right bracket, I type Unity space and a name, and it'll spin up Unity, create a new project, put it in that directory, do the whole thing, set up a Git repo for it, and then it opens up. And from there, I have a single package on my machine that I add, and that package has a menu along the top, which gives me a bunch of drop downs, which include set default packages of types for Package Manager, which would be like install these 5 or 6 assets or install this. And that menu you're seeing there is one of them, where I basically say these are presets and whatever. So I find myself regularly just wanting to spin up a quick, like, here's a project where I only demonstrate 2 or 3 ideas. I do this mostly because people tend to get distracted with other stuff. And so I like to kind of, when I give someone an example, I want to say there isn't anything else in this project but the few things that I'm specifically mentioning, you know.
No, okay, but you find it's mostly because you're doing lots of little projects and samples.
Oh yeah. Like I wouldn't bother doing any of that stuff otherwise. It was more just because I had the search tool already. I realized how long would this take, and to our point we said the last day, the time it took for me to go from actually I want to do this now that I've thought about it is I've done the editor tooling before, I've done the search tooling before. I just had to write the like 6 lines of code to say go to directory, search directory, grab list of files, generate thing, and create a single file, cache it, and whatever. Like it's not that many lines of code.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was just one of those sort of random. But yeah, you're right. I don't do that very often. It was just more because whenever I did want to do that, I would have to open the package manager and run through the whole delays and whatever that was.
Yeah. No, I can see if you're doing it a lot and it's an issue and wanting to address it. There's actually a couple more things just popped into my head. If you guys have a few more minutes that I wanted to talk about. One was just on performance in general. You were talking about that with the package manager, and we talked about this the last couple of weeks. How,
like I said, thanks to you, like I have 2020 open on my desktop as we speak. Thanks to you. That's my now go-to.
It's like 2020 is still the fastest, and looks like 6 is trying to catch up, but one of the things that I noticed, I mean, I think I talked a little bit last week about how some of the developers I've talked to had similar problems. One of the things that I've been working on, at least with my own team, is just addressing the problems hardware-wise, and it seems to be basically resolved. From what I can tell, it seems to resolve the problem for the most part. Just upgrading hardware, going from super old systems to new systems, like new fast setups with SSDs. You're saying Unity is ranking the worst for that's strange. I'm curious. I saw it bad, but slightly better than 22 and 21. So I'm curious why it's different. Interesting. But yeah, I still saw that hardware made like by far the biggest difference, and I still don't see myself sitting and waiting. Even if I go like switch branches and grab something relatively old, let it re-import and all that, like it may be worst case I'm sitting for like a minute, but that's very rare, and it's not enough that it impacts me at all to care. I'm curious, like, are you still seeing it? Just have you been paying attention lately to the performance, and have you been seeing it? And Greg, also, like on your project, yours is a pretty lightweight project. I assume it's super speedy for you and snappy, but I'm curious. Maybe I'm totally off base here.
So I mean, it's using 2022 LTS.
Yep, same here.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. I don't really find myself sitting and waiting a lot with that project.
How often do you say that you like are waiting to a point where it's noticeable, and like, you know, it wasn't just like it clicked and it went a couple seconds and you didn't even notice it? Like, is it regularly you're sitting around waiting?
Early in the project, especially when I'm adding assets and it has to like recompile stuff or create the meta files and stuff like that, I noticed some delays then.
Just when you're importing like big art asset packs?
Yeah, stuff like that, or even just adding new packages, and especially if you add something like do tween where it's got to like set it up for you, or even Odin inspector or Odin validator where you've got to configure it.
Yeah,
those things tend to compile a whole bunch of stuff when you pull them in, and that takes a while.
Yeah, again, it's a patience thing, right? It's how much you're willing to put up with. Like, I'll tell you how bad it is for me. Like, I specifically install Script Inspector. It's an ancient asset that's been around since Unity 4, I think. But it gives you a text editor in Unity where you can, every time you happen to click a .cs file, it'll show you editable text on the right. So it just means that if you want to make quick code changes, you don't even have to double click to open the code editor to go to the thing to change the stuff. So again, I think it's down to wherever your baseline for expectation is. And
well, and that's partially workflow too, because for me, I would never have my project open without the code editor, because I just always have the project and the code editor, like they're open right now. Like,
well, yeah, but
them, right?
it's more than that. It's more. It's like even with the code editor, it's like we're now getting to the point that you open your code editor. Your code editor runs multiple services. It's now got an AI processor running. It's now like loading the fact that when I open up my code editor, it goes through a whole process where if I try to interact with the code for the first X number of seconds, it eats the input, kills it, and stops working for me. It's like each of these little things just drives me insane. I have no patience for anything which is going to actively get in my way. So I have a backup on a backup for everything that's slow or frustrating. I slowly eke them out as I go.
Yeah, when you first open Rider, it takes a while to even before IntelliSense and stuff will start working.
Oh yeah, I just don't close it. Like I say, like I just have that same habit of like I've got a lot of RAM and I just never close anything.
And you never find it disconnects or it starts to get out of sync in weird ways, like where it starts chugging and not working correctly? Because I find myself having to close and reopen Rider from time to time as well.
Now,
not more than a couple times, maybe like once or twice a week, where I end up doing it. And the same with like restarting Unity. But usually I end up having to reboot Unity because there's some editor script doing something stupid and sitting in a infinite loop and crashing it. And then I end up, but no, for the most part, I end up not, like the first startup of Rider, painful. I got to wait and sit and let it do all the loading, and it deletes my stuff and drives me nuts. But after it's done, I haven't really had any problems with it crashing or anything. Sometimes when I switch between enabling and disabling hot reload, though, I do end up having to restart Rider. But then I've noticed that the restarts on it don't seem slow. I don't know if it's because nothing's changed, but opening it the first time with a project feels slow, but closing it and reopening it seems to re-grab all that stuff really fast. I don't know if it's just cached all the stuff that it needs or what, but that's been my experience. I was just a little bit curious though, because I did notice that hardware made a huge difference.
But that's again, it still surprised me because it's not like I'm running a terrible machine. It's still a 2080 Ti in a i9 something 45K or some larger, one of the higher end ones. I've got 128 gig of RAM. I've got it's a beefy machine. Like it shouldn't have any difficulties.
And I've got a Western Digital Raptor. Got old SATA drive or IDE drive. Are you using an SSD?
Of course, I'm using an M.2. Yes, of course. But yeah, honestly, like it is fine.
I got this thumb drive, a USB 3 for all my games.
Don't get me started on those. Yeah, but so again, it's fine in most cases. I still think it comes down to like what is your metric, and I go by the fact that when my job is typing text into text, the idea that that's taking a long time still just infuriates me. And you can have as many, but actually it has to this. I don't care about the downstream effect of the fact that if I make text and I want to check the text does the text thing the text is supposed to do, the idea that I have to sit and wait for a myriad of nested services and systems to regenerate and build and compile is comical and insane to me. And so the more I can move away from that and allow myself a tighter loop of this development, the better. And the easiest way to do that is to have things that are testable with less systems spun up to do it. And Unity decided it wants more and more systems just to exist. Like I said, it still baffles me that a brand new empty project launches XR and cloth and vehicles and everything else. Like, cool, I haven't even decided what this is yet. And you assume I need both VR and cloth and okay. So yeah, clearly the philosophy between me and how Unity approaches a new project is blank slate versus kitchen sink, and that's the difference.
Yeah. There's a comment in chat too about Unreal being the same, which is not untrue. Like Unreal, in my experience, was always slower. Don't get me wrong. Like Unity used to be fastest, but now it's slower. And I think Godot is probably the fastest, but Unreal was always slower for opening up projects, building and doing those things. He's got some other really good strengths, but speed was not one of those.
Yeah, Godot, I admit, was kind of magic when you opened it. It just sort of wait. When does it start loading? Oh, it's finished. Okay.
Yeah, that was how Unity used to be, like back in the old days. And open it up and just pops it like, oh, okay, now what? What do I do? Yeah. The other thing I wanted to really quickly talk about and mention was just the Unite that's coming up. Largely because I found out that the game that I'm working on is actually getting an award there, and I was sad. I was like, oh man, I should be going. But I just wish it was closer. I feel like anybody who's like, if it's close, definitely should check it out and go. I just wish that it was in the United States and close to my house. Like ideally, I wish they would just do it in Los Angeles.
You get enough stuff close to your house. Give everyone else.
I know, but I feel like for events like this, they should be in the places where the developers are. Like,
well, all the developers are in their own home, so checkmate. That doesn't really count anymore.
But I mean, well, at least where the studios are. Like, maybe there's a bunch of studios in Barcelona. I don't know, but I would imagine there's probably not. And it seems like they're always far away. But I would really hope that they do one somewhere that's cheap and close next time. Because I would love to go. It was always my favorite thing to go to. And if this one wasn't a week of travel for the event, I would probably be there too. It's sad, especially now that I know they're getting an award. I was like, oh man, could go up there and have fun with that. Yeah, Story, you're not going, are you?
No. I think a lot of those events. I think I went to quite a few when I was earlier in my career, but now I see them all as a giant collection of noise and sweaty people, and rarely anything that directly affects me. If I'm ever on a team that is doing something, I'll go, but I'm not going to go for the entertainment value of it anymore. That was that's kind of past me, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like going to them. Go ahead, start.
I would go if it was nearby, just so I could run into y'all face to face.
Yeah, I'd go if there was like a big meetup, if we all like agreed on something. But seeing as the last time I agreed to go to an event to meet up with a bunch of people, I got stuck in an airport for 3 days. I'm a little bit more gun shy on the prospect next time. So.
Oh yeah, maybe I have to come to GDC next time. It'll be fun. Just when you're looking at hotels, don't find the cheap ones. And by the cheap ones, I mean they're $200 a night. I was talking to a friend who stayed there last time, and he did exactly. I think he spent like $100 a night, and you basically go in and find out it's like a bunk bed cot in a room with like 10 other bunk bed cots. Like it's
yeah, that's well. My one magic power is I snore like a small herd of animals, and so I found people will tend to leave me alone anyway. I actually didn't even mean to, but earlier on when I met up with a bunch of people back in the VR days, I remember we were all sharing a room, and I woke up to find the room was now mine. It was meant to be for 6 people, but people were like, I can't sleep here, so I felt really bad about that one. But so I'm aware I tend to get a room for myself for everyone's sanity these days.
Oh yeah. I've got a good friend, Josh, who does exactly that. I remember I had to go like sleep in the car multiple times trying to sleep near him, and you could hear him like rumbling the entire building. Used to go to the big game jams and hackathons and stuff, and the LAN parties. Yeah, we went to a lot of those, and he was so loud. Sorry, just having flashbacks of his snoring. All right. Anything else you guys want to talk about? Those were the kind of key things that were on my mind. I was thinking, I wish I was going to Barcelona to go check out this award stuff and talk to people. Or I wish Barcelona was just closer, or somebody would just invent the damn teleporter so I could just go. All right. I would go to all the events if I could teleport to them, if it wasn't for flying. All right, Greg, Story, anything else before we get going?
No, all I'll say is usual, Ko-fi, Discord. If anybody wants any consulting hours, I've probably got another month left in my sort of vaguely free time. You can see my consulting stuff on Ko-fi. I'll probably be back to being busy after that. So there's a month now if you're interested.
Okay. Yeah. So you're doing, is that set up as like an hourly thing, or
yeah,
you can just go kind of book a couple hours and get help with whatever things?
pretty much.
What types of things on the consulting are you focusing on?
Honestly, yeah, it's nothing but whatever people want to whatever people want to talk about. Oftentimes, it's people saying, either how do I architect this problem I have, or I get people going, I'm at this phase in the project. How do I move to the next one? And even for areas that I'm not super familiar with, people know I'm pretty good at having resources. So I'll either be able to help them, or I'll be able to say, here's where you go. And you want to check up this person's content on this, where they talk about that. Basically, I researched a lot of this stuff, and so I can usually help out. Again, I don't promote it that much simply because I'm usually busy on something else. But like I said, there's a very brief window between my last contracting thing and the next thing I'm working on. So I happen to have the next 3-4 weeks on that. So if anybody is reaching out, now's the time.
Nice. Oh, go check that out. Anybody that's looking for something and needs help with stuff, I think it'd be super cool. Last, I should share the Dev Days sale. It's still live for like another week or two. There's some updated assets on there. I shared all the ones that I thought should be on the sale. I got to recommend a couple and put them onto there. So go check it out and see if there's anything that's interesting while it's still on sale. Interestingly, yesterday I ran into an issue with a projectile pack on the asset store. Emailed the developer, and within like an hour had a fix and was good to go, just like usual. Very, very impressed, like usual. I should link that asset pack. It's Gabriel's.
One thing.
This
is one note. Something I've noticed is kind of fun is now that I'm using 2020, what a lot of people don't realize is they switched the .NET version from the 2, and so there's a couple of code features which are quite nice, things like the automatic constructors and a couple of the
like do new races.
But because they're not supported on 4.6 and lower, if you happen to download the latest version of assets, they don't work on the older version. So there's a number of assets which are broken now on anything past 2022. Which is kind of funny. So just an interesting, and the devs clearly don't know this because I've seen a bunch of them where they're not marked as being downwards compatible.
Yeah.
Now again, it's not the end of the world. Like once it opens up, if you know the error, you can open it up and just change a line of code or something. But it's going to actively break on a lot of people's stuff. It's the first time, because I hadn't thought of it at all. I would have used whatever the latest version I was developing on. But it wasn't until I started doing that I'm like, oh no. Every so often I'll write some code and it's like gives me errors after. Okay, I now have a cleanup shortcut in Writer to say fix these 2 or 3 design things to move them up or down a version, because this happens constantly as I'm switching between the 2. So
yeah, I could see that being a big problem for asset store devs, just because it's kind of like being a library dev where you have to use like the bare minimum and like try not to use any of the new features for 5 to 10 years. Like, I would love to use that, but one of our
I'm trying not to as well, because the thing is, they're quality of life. They're not necessary in anything, so I'm trying not to use them myself now. But again, once you've been using these things for so long, it's so hard to like downgrade your way of approaching problems. So.
Yeah, it just becomes a habit, right?
So I know the assets you have to say like what pipeline you support, but you don't specify like what Unity versions it's compatible with, do you?
I think you do. There's a compatibility option, but I don't think you like. It doesn't do a check on it or anything. There's
you just make a list, and I guarantee a lot of devs are basically just saying, oh well, there's nothing, I'm not using features of engine XY. They're not thinking of the .NET version. So.
And it probably got upgraded and updated in a version where it stopped working in the old ones. They started using their new code patterns and didn't realize.
Okay, yeah, it does show the Unity version. All right.
Yeah. Cool. All right, guys. I think this was a good, interesting one for me. So thanks again for coming out, and thanks everybody for joining us live. We'll be back next week with some other topics. I'm not sure what. It'll be out of crunch time, so we'll have something fun and interesting, I hope. All right. Any last words before we go?
Nope.
Oh, don't forget to like and subscribe and all that stuff, and we will see you next week. All right. Bye.
Bye.
My little video.